Ari Temkin, Big 12 Radio on TuneIn Radio, joins us on Mondays in this segment at the end of the 3 o'clock hour. Ari, thanks for being patient with us. Arizona State, Colorado, BYU, and others are still not out of it. Your thoughts, just the overall impression of the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, Kansas is really doing its job to wreck everything Big 12, and the way that their schedule has shaken out here at the end, to basically go from BYU to Colorado to Baylor. I mean, you probably can't play three hotter teams right now in the Big 12 than those three. So, and they've got a chance to really do some damage here on Saturday against Colorado. But, you know, the Buffs are playing as good as anybody. Obviously, we know what the Bears are doing with this offense, explosive as it's been. You can't help but wonder, you know, what might have shaken out for this team this year had Sawyer Robertson been starting all year, but better late than never. And, you know, look, they're going to, you know, get to 7-8 wins potentially, and then, you know, in a bowl game. So we'll see what happens next year. But, yeah, I mean, you look at the top of this conference, and it looks a lot like the preseason bottom of the conference. And then you look at the bottom of the conference, it looks a lot like what the preseason top of the conference was supposed to look like.
Ari, or do Kansas fans have right to be maybe justifiably miffed at the way the first part of the season went, especially given the fact that Lance Leipold kind of admitted that he treated Jalen Daniels with kid gloves in the offseason and through the early part of the season?
Yeah, I mean, look, absolutely. You know, the team that is playing right now for KU is what we thought this team was going to be all year. And so you can't help but be disappointed and think, man, if this team had played like this all year, are we looking at a potential Big 12 championship playoff berth? And look, I mean, you can second guess, I'm sure, a lot of decisions that were made this offseason for KU. But ultimately, we're here. You know, Kansas is playing really good football. You know, for Colorado, you hate to think they're going to overlook Kansas because of how good Kansas has been of late. But, yeah, I mean, but shouldn't Baylor also be a little miffed with the DeQuan Finn thing? I mean, what if Roberts had started all year? I'm sure, you know, you get to the end of the season and there are very few teams that aren't going to be a little bit upset about some of the things that happened in the offseason. I'm sure Oklahoma State fans are upset with Mike Gundy feeling like they were okay at quarterback. I mean, we can go through team by team. Utah with Cam Rising, should they have been a little bit more aggressive in the portal, you know, opposite Rising? So we could play this game with everybody. I think from a Kansas fan's perspective, you know, for how bad they were for a decade, you know, it certainly is disappointing for them to be where they are right now. But I think when you look at it, they've made a lot of progress the last few weeks. And look, some of these guys are still going to be back. I think we looked at it. Jalen Daniels still has another year of eligibility should he take it. So there's potential for this offseason. But, yeah, I mean, certainly, Paul, it's disappointing because this team's playing as good as anybody in the Big 12 right now, and they've got 4 wins.
Ari, on the flip side, first loss there for BYU at home on a Saturday night as well. Like, that's normally their little pocket where they've been super successful. I think there were some warning signs for everybody that's been watching, but you just hope they'd be able to keep finding a way, and that was certainly not the case on Saturday night. I know a lot of people frustrated with their OC and just kind of how things went there at the end, but what did you walk away thinking about BYU, big picture, with that first loss?
Well, and Craig, to your point, like there were a lot of signs that showed itself. I think the top sign was Jake Retzloff, and you know, was he going to be good enough? You know, he's made some throws, he's played well, but I think in this game, you know, he probably needed to do a little bit more. You know, people are going to be upset about Roderick, and I mean, I guess I get it. The offensive coordinator is going to bear a lot of responsibility, but like there were plays to be made, they just weren't made by the quarterback, and so I'm not that concerned about the offensive coordinator. I just think you get fans that are upset with the way the game ends up, and you look back and think, well, this play was a mistake, that play was a mistake. You know, to me, I just thought your quarterback needs to play better. But ultimately, guys, I mean, this just came down to, you know, a really good play call by Lance Leipold, something they had been working on a lot and just never utilized. Lance Leipold talked about basically having used that in 3 times in his career, the quick punt from your quarterback. I mean, that changed the game. Neither team was getting anything going in the second half, really throughout the game on offense. It was 10-10 at halftime. It was 13-10 to that point. So, I mean, there was just nothing happening offensively. It was 2 great, you know, defenses battling it out, and that play turned the tide of the game where, you know, you completely catch them off guard by doing that. And the defensive back thinks the ball's in the air because of the pass, but Jalen Daniels kicks it off his helmet. then Cody Epps for BYU made the heads-up play to dive on the ball. I'm in real time, you're thinking, why would that guy go for it? What is he doing? That's a fumble now. No, it's a fumble off the helmet on the start. It's why Cody Epps dove for it like he did. And, and by Kansas, the ball squirts out. It's funny. All these plays went against Kansas and for BYU the entire season. But in this case, the Jayhawks made their own breaks, and they're able to cash it in from the 3. But that was it. I mean, they scored that with 13 minutes to go in the game. So they still had 13 minutes to score 4 points. But this game was about defense on both sides of the football. So for me, be upset at Aaron Roderick, whatever you want. Jake Retzloff probably had to play a little bit better for this team to overcome, Kansas' defense. And look, credit Kobe Bryant and Mello Dotson, who are 2 of the best corners in college football. And boy, do we have a great matchup from a wide receiver corner standpoint with Colorado and Kansas, because we've got guys that are going to be playing against each other on Sundays here.
Yeah, and Ari, before we move on to some of these other games, both looking back and looking ahead, let's just go ahead and get the big picture question out there. What do you think this past weekend means for the Big 12? I know there's a lot of fear that they're going to be shut out entirely. I still tend to believe the Big 12 champ is getting in. You're just probably not going to get a first-round bye, but how did you feel about the postseason picture coming out of this weekend?
Yeah, the perception is it's really, really bad, and it's hard to disagree with it. Now, I'm looking around. I'm seeing a lot of parity in the SEC. I'm not seeing as much parity in the Big Ten, but that's because it's probably more top-heavy than these other conferences. But, LSU was top 20 all year, and now they're 6-4, and they just lost to a Florida team that weeks ago was going to be firing Billy Napier. Kentucky knocked off Tennessee. So I see a league of parity. I see a Texas team that hasn't beaten anybody at substance yet this year. So for some reason, and I'm not saying the Big 12 is better than the SEC, but the SEC is being called this, death league with how good the teams are. Meanwhile, the Big 12 is being called, a league of parity, and yet they're both leagues of parity. So, I'm not sure that people realize how good a Baylor is, how good an Arizona State is, how good a K-State is, right? They're not playing as well right now, but, my God, at one time they looked to be at the top of the conference. Kansas is playing much better and looks like a credible team that could beat anybody. So, I think from a perception standpoint, it's too bad, but it probably, does shake out in the rankings. And, look, I'll credit Paul Catalina, who brought this up in the first place. Paul brought this up a few weeks ago in the same conversation where, hey, there is a chance here the Big 12 could get shut out. I think it's never been more clear than after this week. Look, Boise State is where they are, and when you play out the rest of the Mountain West, they get UNLV in the championship game. If they win that, they're in. That's going to be one of the top 5 highest-rated conference champs. If Army wins against Notre Dame on Saturday, Big 12 may have a big problem on its hands. That's my biggest concern.
Yeah, no, there's no question about that. What are your thoughts as you mentioned Baylor? We're about to do a segment on them and what has turned around for them. That at 2-4, you are even entering the season, Dave Aranda, we didn't know. He had a great answer to that. We'll play that in the next segment too, about the fact that he's now put himself in a position to not only come back for another year, but this program looks like they've gained some momentum entering the rest of the year and into the offseason.
Yeah, you start with what Jake Spavital and this offense have done. I don't know that there's a better offense in college football. Certainly in the Big 12, we can be enamored with Colorado's and for good reason. But, what we saw this past week, what we've seen from Sawyer Robertson, his evolution, he was definitely more of a run-first kind of guy, and now we're really seeing the full complement of the Jake Spavital offense and the playmakers that they have. Bryson Washington is an absolute stud. That catch he had, he's not a wide receiver. That catch he had, the first touchdown of the game was insane. And then Josh Cameron as well. Those are 2 guys that are, feasibly running backs that are as good a pass catchers as we have in this league. Then Monterey Baldwin. We get to see as much with Ashton Hawkins yesterday, but he's been a guy that's made a name for himself. So, I think when we look at the totality of Baylor's success this year, it's surprising because, I don't have to tell you, if they had Mello Dotson and Kobe Bryant, they'd probably be looking to win a Big 12 championship. Their secondary is not very good. They've got great linebackers. They've got a pretty good defensive line. So it's sort of a surprise that the success they're having isn't where we expected it to be had, considering Dave Aranda took over their defense. But right now, there is an offense that they seem to can't outscore. It's really incredible. Robertson, a few weeks ago, we played the game on our show, moving forward, what Big 12 quarterback would you want? And, I said Sawyer Robertson. I mean, he's built like a tank. We've started to see his arm. Obviously he's very much a product of the system as well in terms of what they're doing offensively. But with the playmakers they have, it's been fun to watch. It's been fun to watch the team come together. I know everybody's, if you ever spend 5 minutes around Dave Aranda, it's hard not to be a fan of his. So I think, what they've done this year, everybody's excited about, because sometimes you get like a lame duck head coach that wins some games in a year that they have to win games. And it's like, Neil Brown's kind of going through that right now in West Virginia. Like even last year, I don't think West Virginia fans were enamored of Neil Brown. I think Aranda's kind of the opposite. Everybody was hoping they'd get to this point. And look, bowl eligibility was the minimum. They still got time to do more damage in the final 2 weeks of the season. But it's been unbelievably impressive what they've done on offense.
Ari, you mentioned Neil Brown. Look, they just gave up 7 touchdowns at home. Another big, bad home loss. I don't think the fans are having a whole lot of fun now, to go back to his earlier comment. Is he, I know that there's some smoke around Brent Brennan, but even year one, it's hard for me to see that. But is he the coach in the Big 12 legitimately that would be considered on the hot seat, seeing as we may have less coach movement across the country this year than in any year previous? Yeah,
absolutely. And look, I think the revenue reality is definitely going to play a factor in these discussions. I think Neil Brown did himself no favors with those comments that you alluded to, Paul. And, fair or not, the optics of that are terrible. And so,
we just lose him?
He struggled.
Okay, no, go ahead.
Am I still here?
You're there. Go ahead.
Apologies. I'm on my way to AT&T Stadium right now to scout out the AT&T Stadium for the Big 12 championship game. So, going to go maybe see some Cowboys Texans, but I don't know how late I'm going to stay. So, at any rate, really going just to scout out the site for our setup for the Big 12 championship game here in a few weeks. But look, Neil Brown just hasn't been good enough. He's a 500 head coach at West Virginia. He hasn't won enough of the games against really good teams, and it's tough because West Virginia is one of those disparate sort of teams and programs that they need to be playing more regional games. They play Pitt, they play Penn State. That sucks. When you look at everybody else's schedule every year, you're going to have a few cupcakes. And every year, Neil Brown and West Virginia, they've got to play, multiple Power 5 games because they need to get that fan support for those regional games to mean a ton. I remember talking to Mike Casaza from Ear Sports years ago, and he said, the traffic that we get to our website when West Virginia plays Texas or when West Virginia plays Oklahoma versus when West Virginia plays Pitt or Penn State, it's not even close. So even though they're playing big 12 games, that just doesn't resonate with fans. Imagine Sikkim is in the same boat in terms of the spike in traffic for more of the regional games for those West Virginia games. So I think all of that plays into it, and then again the fact that he just hasn't overwhelmed, and the fact that he hasn't really won the press conference, you do yourself no favors with that. I think Aranda has done himself a ton of favors. Conversely, I think Neil Brown has done himself very few favors. Neil Brown's a very likable guy. I've very much enjoyed him. I think he's a really good football coach. But at this point, I'd be surprised if he's back next year.
Ari, thank you. Appreciate your time. As always, Big 12 Radio on TuneIn Radio, Big 12 Network on TuneIn Radio every morning, 7 until 10. Ari Temkin with us, joins us on Mondays in the late 3 o'clock hour.